Hey, what's going on, guys? Today we're talking tone construction. I'll just explain it all up front, and then we'll go through and we'll actually create a preset using this method. So first thing we do, we get our amp dialed in. Then we'll dial in our compressors and preamps. Then we'll dial in our reverb. Then once all that is set up, that will basically create our foundation tone. Then we'll move on to adding drive pedals, delay, modulation, and then anything else that we haven't added. And that's it. That's the structure. You just follow that in that order, and everything will be fine. Now, don't confuse this with signal chain order. I have made a video on signal chain order. You can check it out if you want. That's kind of a different thing, okay? This is just the order that we take for dialing in each element in our signal chain. So let's get into it. So I'm gonna jump in here with my 500X edit software. And the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add an amp. So if you're using real pedals, just bypass everything and just focus on your amp for right now. Now, we're not just gonna flip our amp on and say, okay, what's the next step? We're actually gonna spend some time. We're gonna play our guitar, we're gonna listen to our amp, and we're gonna make sure that it's sounding as close to our goal tone as we can get it. So some things to notice. We're gonna focus on EQ, gain, and output, or master volume. Okay, if you have reverb, tremolo, other built-in effects on your amp, just leave all those off for now. We'll get to those in other steps. But for now, let's just get the core tone set up. So once our amp is sounding really good, really great, we're gonna move on to the next element. This is gonna be compressors and preamps. Now, you may not use either one, and if not, that's totally fine. This goes for all the elements. If you don't use that element, just skip it until you get to the next element that you do use. But just in case you do use one of these, let's add it in now. Just gonna add a Dynacomp, get this set up really well. You're gonna notice as soon as you add a compressor or preamp that it's gonna affect how your amp sounds. Like, it's gonna probably increase the volume, it's gonna boost the gain a little bit. So if you need to go back to your amp and make some small tweaks to compensate for that, that's totally fine. If you use a compressor and a preamp, I recommend dialing in whichever one comes first in your signal chain. Get that good, and then move on to the thing that comes later in the signal chain. Once those are good, you can just leave them on. Then we'll move on to the next element. This is gonna be reverb. If you don't need much reverb, you could probably get away with using the reverb that's built into your amp, if your amp has it. So you can give a little bit of amp reverb, and then if you have a reverb pedal, you can add that as well, get that dialed in. Once that's all set up, we've basically now created our foundation tone. Okay, these are the elements that are on all the time. And so we wanna make sure that we spend some good time with this, make sure everything's sounding really good, okay, before we move on. But once we're happy with it, we can move on to the next thing. This is gonna be drive pedals. With drive pedals, there's a lot of different ways that you can set them up and use them. For this example, let's just take somebody who, let's just say you use 3 drive pedals. One drive pedal you use as kind of like an always on distortion. The other drive pedal you use every now and again, maybe for like song intros where you have like a melody that you wanna just have like a volume boost. And then the third drive pedal, this is for like your solos, so you just have the gain cranked on it. Okay, this is how I would go about dialing this in. So let's get the first one. The first one we'll set up is gonna be the one that's on all the time. So get that set up, make sure it's blending well with your amp. Give it that little bit of extra distortion. Okay, something like that. And if you leave it on all the time, then just leave it on and move on to the next drive pedal. This is gonna be our clean boost. So we'll focus on this, we'll turn that drive pedal on, kind of audition it, we'll play it a little bit. Maybe it's not super bright, something like this. Just a little bit of drive and some boost. Once it's sounding good, then we'll turn it off and we'll move on to the third drive pedal. This is gonna be kind of like our outrageous lead solo tone. Okay, let's do something like, we'll use a rat for this. Put it right there. Kind of make it sort of bright. I can never remember how the filter works on rats, but we'll just put it in the center for now. But we'll just make this bright. Crank the drive, crank the output. Okay, when that's sounding good, then we'll turn it off. Now, if you're someone that likes to stack drive pedals, the way to do it is like start with the drive pedal that you use the most. Get that sounding good with your amp. Once that's good, then move on to the next stage drive. Get those 2 pedals in your amp sounding good. Then move on to the third stage drive. Get that sounding good with all 3 pedals in your amp. And once that's good, then just bypass them and just leave the one that's on most often on. Now, the next thing we'll move on to is gonna be our delay. And delay we'll treat the same way that we treated the drive pedals. let's just say you're using 3 delay pedals. One delay pedal is on all the time, one is on just for certain parts of a song, and then the third one you use when you do solos. But let's just start with the one that's on all the time. Okay, let's say that this is gonna be like an analog delay, kind of like short repeats. Maybe like 1/8 notes or something. Not too much feedback. Keep it kind of dark. And something like that. Once that's sounding good, we'll leave it on. And we'll move on to, it's probably not gonna sound good there, put it there. Then we'll move on to the one that we use, every once in a while. Let's say this will be like our dotted eighth, for our U2 cover song. I know the Edge used like a memory man a lot, but we're gonna use a digital delay for this. Dotted eighth. Maybe short feedback, but kind of high in the mix. Gonna brighten up a little bit. Okay, something like that. We'll get that set up. But we'll turn it off because we don't use it all the time. Then, when we rip our outrageous solos, we use a third delay. Now for this, we'll want to turn on our drive pedal that we use for the solo. And then we'll dial in this delay. So maybe this is another analog delay with like longer trails, but kind of lower in the mix. Okay, makes our solos a little bit more epic and ambient and sustainy. And once that's sounding good, then we'll turn off that delay, and then we'll also turn off our outrageous lead distortion. Now, if you like to stack your delays, kind of follow the same method as with the drives. Whichever one is on the most, start with that, leave it on, then get kind of your next most frequent one, turn it on, dial it in, leave it on, and then get your final one on. Once your delays are sounding really good, then we're gonna move on to the next element. This is gonna be modulation. So for modulations, let's just say for this example, you use a chorus like all the time, and then you also use a phaser when you rip your outrageous solo. First thing we'll do is we'll get our chorus set up. Now for this example, I'm gonna have to get rid of some of these things. So let's get rid of that, that. Okay, so first thing we'll set up, we'll do the thing that's on the most, which is gonna be our chorus. We'll audition it, make it sound really good. Okay, maybe something like that. Once it's set up, we'll leave it on, and then we're gonna move on to the next modulation effect, which is our phase, which we use when we rip our outrageous solos. So just like before, we're gonna turn on the drive pedal that we use, and then we're also gonna turn on the delay that we use, okay, which I'm confusing myself, which I think is this one actually. Yeah, so we'll have that one on. Did I not turn that off? I didn't turn it off before, but whatever. You get what I'm saying. So we'll have our drive pedal, our delay pedal, and our phase. And we'll get our phase sounding really good. We'll do this MXR one. And yeah, we'll probably keep it here in the chain. Get that sounding really good, okay? Once that sounds good, then we'll turn it off because we only use it for our solos. And then at this point, we've basically created our tone, and then we can move on to any of the other things that we haven't talked about. So that could be like wah pedals, volume pedal, like noise gate, things like that. You can then drop in where they need to go. So if you followed all these steps, then you've basically ensured that every effect is in its proper place, that it's doing its proper job, that it's well optimized for the job that it's doing. Even as we bypass effects, we can keep bypassing effects, and our tone is still gonna hold up, it's still gonna sound good. Even if we bypass literally everything and all we're left with is our amp, it's still gonna sound good because we took the time to make it sound good. Anyways guys, that's all I wanna cover in this video. If you found it helpful, please hit that like button, subscribe, share, do all the things, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. So until then, see you later.